listeners, to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the podcast where we uncover the stories, strategies, and the shifts that help us live with more purpose, balance, and peace. I'm your host, Avik, and today's episode is all about redefining what success really means, especially for those of us who have built the careers, families, reputations that look great on the outside but feel quietly unfulfilling on the inside. Yeah. So, dear listeners, my guest today, please welcome Jake Kennington. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here in a chat this morning, Avik.
Amazing. And dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion, I'd love to introduce you to Jake. So, Jake has spent over a decade as a licensed structural engineer, designing $100 million buildings and leading high pressure, high stakes projects. But despite the success, something was missing. His relationship were strained. His health was slipping. And the life he was constructing didn't quite match the one he actually wanted to live. So, Jake did something radical. He re engineered his entire life. And today he is the founder of Actively Human, where he helps mid career professionals realign their goals, reclaim their energy, and build lives that feel just as good on the inside as they look on the outside. So, I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners. Jake, welcome to the show, and it's really an honor to have you here today.
Excited to be here and chat more about this, Avik.
Amazing. So, Jake, you were designing, as I mentioned, multi-million dollar buildings and the kind of work most people dream of. And kind of you have said that it left you feeling unfulfilled. So, what was the moment that you realized success as you were defining it wasn't working anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we all
Mhm.
kind of follow the people in front of us most of the time. Our coworkers, our boss, we get guilty of kind of this mass trance of just doing what everyone around us does, which oftentimes is a good thing if we're around good people.
Mhm.
But I think we also become a little bit complacent. At least that's how my story was with
Mhm.
kind of the status quo and doing what's the norm.
Mhm.
And so I'll explain a little bit of my background. You had a great introduction there for my experience as a structural engineer, so I appreciate that intro. But as you said, I was a structural engineer. I still am for about the last 10 to 15 years, depending on when you start the clock in college and my work experience. And as a structural engineer, that environment is high pressure. It's a highly technical field. There's a lot of math and science and education and licensing and tests that go along with that. And like you mentioned, I was designing $100 million projects. I think just a few months ago, the guy in the cubicle next to me was designing a $1.2 billion hospital. And this is a kid that was a couple years out of college, right? And here he is working on this over $1 billion project that he's managing and working on.
Mhm.
And so, as engineers, we're managing deadlines, we're managing budgets, we're working in teams, we're doing a lot of collaboration. But for me, what happened is just a few years ago, my life changed. And what I mean by that is just the circumstances of my life changed. I became a structural engineer. I started that journey when I was pretty young. I was in my early 20s. I turned 40 in next February.
Mhm.
And so in that span of time, those 10 or 15 years on my journey as a structural engineer, I became a father to four amazing kids. I became a husband.
Mhm.
And as life changed, my priorities began to shift. What I valued, what I found most important, shifted as my life itself shifted.
Mhm.
And so what I found was that I started second guessing everything that I had done up to that
Mhm.
point. And that's because I along that journey, I let my health slide, my physical health. I was obese. I was overweight. I wasn't healthy physically. And I also let my relationships become strained with my wife and my kids. I wasn't around as much as I wanted to be. I wasn't as present with them as I wanted to be. And the career that I had once been so proud of no longer felt aligned with the life that I wanted to live. And so I made some changes. I redefined success on my own terms instead of just following the guy next to me in the cubicle next to me or my boss or anyone else. I decided to define success on my own terms, and I rebuilt my habits, I restored my relationships, and I started to realign my life with what was most important to me. And that journey led me to start my company, Actively Human, so that I could help other people do the same thing.
Got it. So, uh, how did that realization shift the way that you approached both the work and life? I mean, if you can share a bit.
Yeah. So what happened with me and my situation, I think I'll share this is pretty common for a lot of people, but it's also unique in the sense that it's my story and my journey. I grew up with a father that worked for himself. He was self-employed. He was an entrepreneur. He was a jeweler, and I had a front row seat to entrepreneurship. And so for me, most people think that's a good thing in the sense that I would be very likely to become an entrepreneur and own my own business. But for me as a kid, it scared me away from working for myself because I saw the late nights that my dad had. I saw the money troubles that he had or the stresses that came from financially working for yourself.
Mm,
And as a kid, I thought, I'm never working for myself because I saw what that did to my dad,
mm,
and I don't want that. So for 35 years, I thought, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a degree. I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to work a 9 to 5 until I retire.
mm,
But again, as my life changed and I figured out that I wanted to have more time with my family and have flexibility of my schedule
mm,
and be able to coach a football team for my son or be around just more for my wife and my kids,
mm,
I figured out that maybe entrepreneurship is a route that I want to take. And so for me, what I'm slowly doing is transitioning to working full time for myself. So I still work as a structural engineer a couple days a week, but I've also scaled back that time on that 9 to 5 to 4 days a week so that I can spend more time on my coaching business with Actively Human. So my pivot or my change there and how it influenced my life is that I've been able to embrace this identity of being an entrepreneur,
mm,
whereas for the first 30 plus years of my life, that was not even on the radar for me.
mm. Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, that's such an important truth. I mean, success without alignment eventually feels kind of like a failure. So, exactly. And also, like, you have created a three-step framework called REDAC. So, and to help people clarify their priorities and also make meaningful progress in uh, just 7 weeks. So, I mean, if you can walk us through about it in short. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So when I work with my clients, I use a framework called what I call the REDAC framework, like you said, REDAC,
Yeah.
and that stands for redefine, realign, and reconnect. And we do that in like an 8 week program. And so what that involves is the initial part is a big chunk of it, redesign, or sorry, redefine success, like we've been talking about, is the first portion of that. Realign and reconnect. And I'll go over those real briefly. Redefine success, I think, is important because if you ask 10 people, 10 different people what success means to them, you'd probably get 10 wildly different answers, right? And if you ask those same 10 people a year from now what success means for them, they might even give you a different answer.
Yeah.
I have this quote on the screen of my phone here. I don't know if you do video for the podcast, but I'll read it to you. It's from a man named Heraclitus, which lived thousands of years ago, and he said this. He said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." And so again, going back to this idea of life changes and we change, therefore our definition of success, unfortunately, but fortunately, is also constantly changing. And so I get really clear with people for the first month or so, for the first couple of weeks, on what they define success as in this phase of life. There's an author, James Clear. He wrote this book called Atomic Habits, which is a very popular book. Most of your listeners have probably heard of this book or possibly read it. And
Mm.
in that book, he mentions that real change doesn't start with what we do; it starts with who we believe we are.
Yeah.
And he says in the book, true behavior change is identity change. And so, what I spend a lot of time with my clients working on is the identity, the perceived person, how they perceive themselves as a person, and changing that so that they can make true change in their own lives. A lot of times we chase new outcomes with an old identity. We want to lose weight. We want to lose weight or be healthier, but we don't start with the identity of I'm a healthy person. We just go, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lose weight because I know that's important. And so it really starts with I'm a healthy person and therefore I make healthy choices. So we get really clear on redefining success and what that means for them from an identity standpoint. Then we take action to realign that aim with how they're showing up in the world. And lastly, which I think some people find as a surprise, is we focus on reconnecting not only with themselves, but also their loved ones along the way. And so I think it's really important that we have deep human connections in
Mm.
order to find meaning and purpose in what we do in both our work and what we do at home.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. So, um, I mean, it's really practical also because structured way to turn reflection into the real change. So, that is very important. Yeah. And then, like you have worked with professionals who look kind of successful but are quietly burning out as well, right? So, um,
Mhm.
so one story that really stands out in your client who worked kind of 70 hours a week. I mean, it's too pathetic, but yeah, 70 hours a week for 3 straight years, a husband, a father of five. I mean, who nearly lost it all. So, what did he do to turn things around? I mean, if we can share. No need to take the names, but I mean, if you can share a bit.
Yeah, I'll share his story just for privacy reasons. We'll just
Mhm.
call him John, but
Yeah.
he is a real person. I worked with him for 16 weeks. He lives here in Utah, owns his own company, has about 20 employees.
Yeah.
And like you said, from the outside, he was doing everything right. His
Mm.
business was thriving, they were profitable, they were making money, his employees were happy.
Mm.
But if you looked at his personal life behind the scenes,
Yeah.
he was exhausted. He was working over 70 plus hours a week for 3, almost 4 years. That's 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. And meanwhile, he's got, like you said, a wife and 5 kids. And so similar to my story, his relationships were suffering. His physical health had declined. He wasn't in the best physical health, as you could imagine. There wasn't a lot of time for exercise and going to the gym and whatnot. And when I first met with him, before we did any work whatsoever, this is what he told me. He literally said word for word, I can only do this for another year before I burn out,
Mm.
before I burn the whole thing down. He said, I got one more year of runway left and that's it.
Mm.
And so John, he knew that he needed to delegate more to his employees. He had great employees that he could trust, but for one reason or another, he just wasn't able to. He knew they were reliable and that they could get the work done, but the real challenge for him, it wasn't tactical. I think oftentimes we know what the next step in our own journey is. We know what we need to do, but we have a hard time doing it because we haven't yet solved this puzzle of what's my new identity, going back to this identity piece. So for John, his issue or his challenge was that he still saw himself as the guy that had to do everything. He was still acting as an individual contributor, which he had done
Mm.
for over a decade previously in his career when he was working for someone else.
Right.
And so it wasn't about necessarily trusting his employees. it was about putting on this other identity or this other hat of I'm the CEO, I'm the president of the company, I'm the leader, and I'm no longer the individual contributor. And so that's really difficult to do because you have to shed your old skin or your old identity and embrace a new one. And it's something that you've probably never done before and don't know how to do. And so it's awkward and uncomfortable and difficult, but you know that that's the right thing to do. So we worked together to help him embrace that new identity. He had been running the company for almost 4 years, but he hadn't really truly put on the identity of I'm the president, the CEO, the leader of this ship, and I don't have to do all the work. I just have to lead the work and work through other people. So one thing we did with him that it sounds simple and almost trite or like it's not that important, but the first thing that we had that I had him do was take a day off,
Yeah.
a full day off. He took a full day off from work. He had his employees run that day, and if there was a fire to put out or a client that needed help, that he would normally jump in and take that action, he allowed his employees to do that. And then shortly thereafter, he took 2 consecutive days off, and again, trusted his employees and let them do the work, and he worked through them. And by the time I was done working with him, for 16 weeks, his goal was to take an entire week off so that he could spend time with his wife and his kids and be there for them. Because again, that's another identity shift for him, was to be a present father and husband and spend more time with his kids and his family. And so, although again, it sounds simple, it's incredibly difficult to do sometimes, is to let go of the old version of yourself and to embrace a new identity and a new version.
Wow. I mean, it's really oh, what to say? I mean, 70 hours a week. I mean, it's a. I mean, when you
It's a
think,
lot.
it's very, very difficult to think. Also, I mean, it's really powerful the story. I mean, that you mentioned, and sometimes we need a kind of breakdown to build a breakthrough. Also, so thanks for saying
Mhm.
that. Yeah, exactly. And you have said that something I love is if you can design a building to withstand the earthquakes, you can design a life to withstand uncertainty. It's really, I really love that. So, uh, I mean, what are the principles that make a life not just a structure but robust?
Ooh, the principles that make a life robust. That's a great question. I think there may be some general answers to that, but it's also specific to the individual.
Hmm.
Um, That's why I work with people to redefine what success means for them and at that given phase of life. So for me, when I started engineering back in 2010, 2011, 2012, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. And what I valued then is different than what I value now. Um, and so I think that's an ever changing answer, and it's specific to the individual. But this is what I will say is a general answer that may be applicable to most people. I was looking back through, I'm a big advocate for journaling. And I was looking back through my journals over the years and kind of taking account of a lot of the changes that I've been through. And I found that I've lived, like I said, I turned 40 next year in February. And in the 40 years that I've been on this earth, I've lived in 25 houses,
Okay.
14 different cities. I've had over 40 roommates, and that's not even including my wife and kids. That's in college and other experiences that I've had. I've lived in 2 different countries, and I've had 22 different jobs, including structural engineer. And what the reason I mention all those statistics is I've been around a lot of people in a lot of different settings.
Yeah.
And what I've learned about people through those experiences that I've had that I just mentioned is 2 things. And this goes back to your question about what gives us a prosperous life. People want 2 things. They want to be engaged in the work that they're doing. They want to be involved and engaged. They want to be helpful, right? They want to make an impact in the world, and they also want to be connected to other people. So they want deep, meaningful relationships. And
Exactly.
I think oftentimes it's difficult for us to balance those two. And we kind of pick one or the other, and then we neglect the other one. So we're all in on our career, and we climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, and we get those licenses, we get those degrees, we get that promotion, but we kind of neglect our family or our close friends, or vice versa. We disengage from work and focus on our relationships. And I think it's important, at least in the experience that I've had in these 40 years on this earth, that we make both of those top priorities, that we're engaged in whatever it is we do from a professional standpoint, but we also make sure that we're equally connected in putting effort into the relationships that we have with other people.
Amazing. Amazing. So, if you have to give one advice to the listeners today, what that will be?
That's a great question. I love kind of giving a practical application, and I'll say two things if you don't mind.
Sure.
First is something that the listeners can do right away. Is I would suggest I do this every morning. Go on a walk. And the reason I say go on a walk is because it's great to be outside, and it's great to be away from all the distractions, from our phones, from the internet, from email, all those things. Go on a walk for 30 minutes, slow down, and seriously ask yourself this question: what does success look like for you in this phase of life, whatever phase of life you're in? And think about that on the walk. And then the second thing that I'll add to that is I sent this over to you earlier, Vic, but I have a free resource that I'd love to share with your audience.
Sure.
It's called the Own Your Life Playbook. And if today's conversation that you and I have had has inspired anybody listening to go a little bit deeper on these subjects of kind of reclaiming your life, owning your life, building a life that's full of deep meaning and connection with other people, please go to my website, activelyhuman.com. And there's a free resource there called the Own Your Life Playbook. It's activelyhuman.com/hashtag playbook. It's a free download. And you can do a deeper dive into some of the things that we've talked about today. So activelyhuman.com/hashtag playbook. Go on a walk today. Think about that question. What does success look like for you right now in this phase of life? And then go ahead and download that free resource. And I'd love to help in any way that I can there.
Amazing. Amazing. So, Jake, thank you so much for bringing such grounded wisdom and heart to this conversation. And for everyone who's listening, if you have been checking all the boxes but still feel kind of something's missing, then maybe it's a time to redraw that blueprint. And definitely, you can learn more about Jake, his work through Actively Human, as he has already mentioned. I'll put on the links into the show notes for your easy reference. And access his free Own Your Life playbook. And I mean, because at the end of the day, your life deserves to feel as good as on the inside as it looks on the outside. So, with this hope, this is your host Avik, and this is Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, reminding you that success without joy isn't success at all. So, it's just noise. So, slow down, redefine, rebuild, and live as actively human. So, thank you so much.